You are standing in your kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday morning, still wearing your husband's old sweater because it smells like him, still trying to figure out how to brew coffee for one instead of two, when the lawyer calls with news that makes your knees buckle. The house you have lived in for 28 years, the retirement savings you and your husband built penny by penny through double shifts and sacrifice. The college fund for your grandchildren, all of it is gone. Not lost to medical bills or bad investments or even the cruel hand of fate, but stolen by the one person you would have trusted with your last breath, your son. He forged your signature on documents that transferred everything into his name 3 months before your husband died. And now you are standing in a home that no longer belongs to you. Looking at family photos on walls you cannot legally claim, while your 34-year-old son refuses to even return your calls. How does a mother come back from a betrayal this deep? And what do you do when the child you raised becomes the person who destroys you? My name is Margaret. I am 57 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I thought I understood my life. I was a wife for 32 years, a mother of 2. A grandmother of 3 beautiful babies who call me Mimi and think I hung the moon. I worked as a nurse for 26 years before my knees and back finally gave out, and then I cared for my husband through his final illness with the same devotion I had given to strangers in hospital beds. I believed in family above everything else. I believed that if you loved your children fiercely and sacrificed endlessly, they would honor that sacrifice. I believed that the boy I rocked through nightmares and cheered at baseball games and put through college would never, ever hurt me. I was wrong about all of it. My son Daniel was always complicated. Even as a child, he had this way of twisting situations to make himself the victim of finding reasons why rules did not apply to him. When he was 12, he stole money from my purse and blamed his younger sister. When he was 16, he wrecked my car and said it was because I had not maintained it properly. When he was 22 and dropped out of college, he told us we had pressured him too much. My husband always made excuses for him. Said Daniel was sensitive, misunderstood that he would grow out of it. I wanted to believe that too. Mothers always want to believe their children will grow into the people they were supposed to be. After college, Daniel bounced between jobs, always with a story about why the boss was unfair or the company was corrupt. He moved back home when he was 27, saying he just needed a few months to get on his feet. Those months turned into years. He lived in our basement, rent-free, ate our food, used our utilities, and contributed nothing while my husband and I continued working into our 60s. When I suggested he pay even a small amount toward groceries, he accused me of being cruel. When my husband gently brought up the idea of him finding his own place, Daniel said we were trying to abandon him. My daughter Sarah saw through it, told me Daniel was manipulating us. But I could not bear the thought of my son being homeless or struggling. I let him take and take and take because that is what mothers do. We sacrifice ourselves on the altar of unconditional love. Then my husband got sick. It's pancreatic cancer, the kind that moves fast and shows no mercy. Within weeks, he went from the strong man who still mowed our lawn to someone who could barely walk from the bedroom to the bathroom. I became his full-time caregiver, managing medications and appointments and insurance nightmares while watching the man I loved disappear. Daniel was still living with us during all of this. He worked part-time at a warehouse, but mostly he stayed in the basement playing video games while I sat alone with his dying father upstairs. He rarely helped. When I asked him to sit with his father so I could take a shower, he acted like I was asking him to move mountains. He said he could not handle seeing his dad like that it was too traumatic for him. My husband died on a Wednesday morning in October with me holding his hand and Daniel asleep in the basement. The weeks after the funeral were a blur of paperwork and condolence, casseroles, and sleepless nights. Daniel suddenly became very interested in the estate. He asked questions about the will, about bank accounts, about the deed to the house. He said he wanted to help me navigate everything, that it was too much for me to handle alone in my grief. He offered to meet with a lawyer, to organize the financial documents, to take some of the burden off my shoulders. It felt like the first time in years that he was actually showing up for me. I was so grateful for that small kindness in the middle of my devastation that I did not see what was really happening. I did not see the trap closing around me. Then came the phone call from the estate lawyer that made my world collapse all over again. He said there were irregularities with the property transfer documents. The house and the savings accounts and the investment portfolio had all been transferred into Daniel's name 3 months before my husband died, with my signature on every document. Except I had never signed anything. I had never even seen those documents. The lawyer explained that if the signatures were forged, I would need to pursue legal action, but the burden of proof would be on me. I would need to hire my own attorney, possibly a handwriting expert, and be prepared for a long, expensive battle. He said these cases were difficult because family members often have access to signatures that makes forgery hard to prove. I called Daniel 17 times that day. He did not answer. I drove to the house where he had moved 2 weeks after the funeral, a nice rental property I had wondered how he could afford. He would not come to the door. I stood on that porch calling his name, my voice breaking while neighbors watched from their windows. Finally, he sent me a text message. It said the transfer had been his father's idea, that my husband had wanted to protect the assets and had asked Daniel to handle everything. That I was confused because of my grief. He said if I tried to cause legal trouble for him, he would have no choice but to cut off all contact. And did I really want to lose my son and my grandchildren over my paranoia? That text message was the moment everything crystallized. The years of excuses and manipulation suddenly made terrible sense. My son had watched his father dying and seen an opportunity. He had used my grief and exhaustion as cover to steal everything we had built. He had forged my signature and moved out before I even knew what had happened. And now he was threatening to take my grandchildren away if I dared to fight back. The rage that filled me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever felt. It was pure and clean and clarifying. It burned away the last shreds of denial. I was done being the sacrificial mother. I was done protecting someone who had weaponized my love. I hired a lawyer that same week. Not the estate lawyer my husband had used, but a family litigation attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. Her name was Victoria, and she was exactly the kind of woman I needed. Sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, and completely unfazed by family betrayal. She listened to my story without judgment, reviewed the documents, and confirmed what I already knew. The signatures were forged. The timing was suspicious. My husband had been heavily medicated and barely conscious 3 months before he died. In no condition to make major financial decisions. She said we had a strong case, but I needed to be prepared for it to get ugly. She said Daniel would likely claim the transfer was legitimate, that he would paint me as a confused elderly woman, that he would use every manipulation tactic in the book. She asked me if I was ready for that. I told her I had already lost my son. The person living in my house and stealing my money was just a stranger wearing his face. We filed a lawsuit for fraud, undue influence, and elder financial abuse. The court documents laid out everything: the forged signatures, the timeline of the transfers, the suspicious circumstances. Daniel received the papers on a Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, my phone was flooded with messages from his wife. From my daughter-in-law, who I had welcomed into our family and helped financially more times than I could count. She called me evil. She said I was trying to destroy her children's security because I was jealous of their happiness. She said Daniel had only been trying to help me, and this was how I repaid his kindness. She said if I did not drop the lawsuit immediately, I would never see my grandchildren again. When I tried to explain the truth, she hung up on me. When I tried to call back, I was blocked. The next phase was exactly as ugly as Victoria had warned. Daniel hired his own lawyer and filed a countersuit claiming I had promised him the house and then changed my mind out of spite. He submitted testimony saying I had been mentally unstable since the funeral, that I had accused him of terrible things without evidence, that he was heartbroken over my delusions. He painted himself as the devoted son who had moved back home to care for his parents, who had sacrificed his own life to help us, who was now being attacked by his mentally ill mother. His wife submitted a statement saying she had witnessed my erratic behavior. Even some extended family members started spreading rumors that I was having a breakdown, that grief had made me paranoid. But Victoria subpoenaed financial records that showed Daniel had started planning the transfers 6 months before my husband's diagnosis. Around the same time, he had suddenly started asking questions about our assets. She found emails between Daniel and a financial advisor discussing asset protection strategies that made his intentions clear. She brought in a handwriting expert who testified that the signatures were definitely forged, showing hesitation marks consistent with someone tracing my signature. She presented testimony from my husband's oncologist confirming he had been heavily sedated and cognitively impaired during the period when these transfers supposedly took place. Every piece of evidence built on the last, and I watched Daniel's story fall apart. The breaking point came during Daniel's deposition. Victoria asked him simple, direct questions about the timeline, about conversations with his father, about why he had moved out so quickly. He tried to maintain his story at first, but as the questions got more specific, his answers started contradicting each other. He got angry, defensive, started blaming me for asking too many questions when his father was dying. Victoria let him talk, let him show exactly who he was. By the end, even his own lawyer looked uncomfortable. The court-ordered mediation happened 3 weeks later. Daniel's attorney recommended he settle. The evidence was overwhelming, and if we went to trial, he would almost certainly lose and potentially face criminal charges. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel's wife called me directly, bypassing the lawyers and court orders. She was crying, hysterical, saying they were going to lose everything. That Daniel had used the money to invest in a business venture that had failed, that they were drowning in debt. She begged me to have mercy, to remember my grandchildren, to remember that family was supposed to forgive. She said Daniel was sorry but could not admit it because of his pride, that he had made a terrible mistake but did not deserve to have his life destroyed. For just a moment, I felt that old familiar pull, that maternal instinct to fix everything and absorb the pain. Then I thought about my husband dying while our son stole from us. I thought about standing in my own kitchen being told I no longer owned my home. I thought about every time I had sacrificed and been taken for granted. I told her I would see them in court. The night before the settlement hearing, Daniel showed up at my sister's house where I had been staying. He looked terrible, like he had not slept in days. He asked to talk to me alone, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat on the porch in the dark, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he dropped the victim act. He admitted he had forged the signatures. He admitted he had planned it. He said he had convinced himself that he deserved the money more than I did, that I would be taken care of by Social Security and my pension, that he needed it for his family's future. He said watching his father die had made him panic about his own mortality, and he had made a terrible choice. He did not ask for forgiveness. He just sat there crying and said he knew he had destroyed everything. I looked at this man who was supposed to be my son, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. No anger, no grief, no maternal protective instinct, just a deep bone-tired exhaustion. I told him he was right. He had destroyed everything. The mother who would have given him anything died the day I found out what he had done. And he would spend the rest of his life knowing he killed her himself. I told him I would accept the settlement the court recommended, which returned all the assets to me with damages, and in return, I would not pursue criminal charges. But after the paperwork was signed, he was never to contact me again. No calls, no letters, no attempts at reconciliation. He asked about his children, about whether he could send pictures or updates. I told him that door was closed. He had threatened to take my grandchildren from me as a weapon, and I would not give him the chance to do it again. He left that porch a stranger, and I have not seen him since. The settlement was finalized 6 weeks ago. I got the house back, the savings accounts, the investments, everything he had stolen. The lawyer fees and the stress took their toll, but I won. The house is legally mine again, and I am rebuilding the life my husband and I created together. My daughter Sarah has been my rock through all of this, helping me sort through the emotional wreckage and reminding me that I did the right thing. She says her brother made his choices a long time ago, and I finally stopped enabling them. Some people in my extended family still think I was too harsh, that I should have found a way to forgive, but they did not live through what I lived through. They did not feel the violation of having your own child steal from you while drowning in grief. They do not get to judge the boundaries I built to survive. I think about my grandchildren sometimes, about the birthdays and holidays and milestones I will miss. That loss sits heavy in my chest on quiet days. But I also know that staying in their lives would have meant continuing to pretend that what Daniel did was forgivable. That family means accepting abuse in the name of unconditional love. I could not model that for them. I could not teach them that love means letting people destroy you. Maybe someday, when they are older, they will understand. Maybe they will reach out and want to know my side of the story. Or maybe they will not, and I will have to make peace with that too. Either way, I chose myself. For the first time in my life as a mother, I chose protecting myself over protecting my child from consequences, and I am learning to live with that choice. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it would be this: your children are not extensions of you, and their failures are not yours to fix. You can love someone with your whole heart and still let them face the consequences of their choices. You can be a devoted mother and still refuse to be a doormat. The greatest gift you can give your children is teaching them that actions have consequences, that manipulation will not be rewarded, and that love does not mean endless second chances. I wish I had learned that lesson 30 years ago. I wish I had set boundaries when Daniel was 12 and stealing from my purse instead of waiting until he was 34 and stealing my entire life. But regret is just another form of self-punishment, and I am done punishing myself for the choices other people made. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in this situation? And do not forget to subscribe to Golden Years Diary for more stories like this.